You will only get IPv6 addresses for all your new deployments, right? So the questions are you ready? What about your infrastructure for IPv6, right? And can you deliver IPv6 services, for example, in this year now, right? So if you have got some block from last/8, which is now already happening, that means you can't get a V6, you can't get a V4 block. So are you ready now, right? So what about your plan for V4 services to your customers? Already some of the customers, they have a lot of IPv4 addresses. So can you now start giving V6 addresses to them, right? These are things you'll have to think. What about your other services, things like DNS, SMTP, the mail, right, web, and so on? And then there are lots of security stuff, monitoring. ISPs, they do all these things. Can you all support these things, right? Is it compatible with V6, right? And if you don't have addresses, or do you have enough addresses? If you don't have IPv6, IPv4 addresses, obviously you'll have to come back and get the V6 addresses. Now that was for the operators, the ISPs. What about enterprises, right? The content providers. And very soon, your customers and business partners and so on, they will have only V6 addresses again, right? So will your website and the services and so on, is it visible via IPv6? Because if you are enterprise, you want to actually have your website, you want your customers to come and visit your website, maybe you want to sell your products, right? So, but if you're running only on V4, can you cater for the IPv6 customers, right? So these are the things that you need to think. What about domain names? Okay, do you support COD A, kind of, these are very DNS-specific things. Do you support these type of records which are related to IPv6? What about your service providers? If I am an enterprise, can my service provider give me IPv6 addresses, right? Because if I want to have some new services and so on, or if I'm going to develop my content and so on, I have to make sure that my service provider can provide me the V6 services, right? So have you consulted them? Have you asked them whether they can give you V6 addresses, right? So these are some of the things that the enterprises will have to think about. What about the others? Things like system integrators, consultants. Can you all, so there are lots of pieces that we talked about, ISP side, the enterprise side, the customer sides. Can you put all these pieces together, right? Because for the internet to work and everything to work, you have to put all those pieces together. Can you do that? Are your people trained to answer those questions, right? Can you help your customers with their planning? So these are some of the pretty common questions that you will have to think about. What about academics and educators, right, in universities and so on? So what about your universities? Are you ready with IPv4, IPv6 now, right? Are you producing V6-ready graduates? The people or the pass-outs, the graduates who are passing out from universities, are they familiar with IPv6? Do they know how to work with V6, configure V6, and so on? Have you upgraded their skills? So these are some questions for the academic institutions and educators and so on, right? And how about the governments? Do you have some procurement criteria mandating V6 capabilities, right? What about the agencies? Are they ready with IPv6? What about online and e-learning type, e-government type services? Are they ready with IPv6? And in a country or in an economy, what about so many other industries? Are they speed up with this IPv6 migration, right? So these are some of the aspects that the government should think about as well. So in terms of preparing for the V6 transition, overall planning, any organization will have to think about quite key aspects, things like, first of all, you have to review your existing V4 structure or the plan, right? What sort of equipments you have? Are they old equipments? Can they support the new protocols? So all those things. You'll have to do a proper study about your existing requirement. And then you'll have to, of course, develop your IPv6 plan. What are you going to do? In fact, some of these things we discussed in the training that we had Saturday and Sunday. But these are some of the plans that you'll have to think about. And what about budget readiness? So this is one of the biggest challenges that from our experience that we see that in many of the organizations, it's very hard to get some of the budget's approval because the top management will have to think about these requirements, the current requirements, and then basically allocate the necessary funds and budgets. Obviously, there'll be some expenses, right? And the technical management, things like other aspects, your security systems, the monitoring, whatever it is, other software, the applications, all those things, right? And human capacity, things like training. The staff has to be trained. People should know on these things. If someone is managing our networks, if someone is even your developers, whoever it is, they'll have to be familiar with the new protocol as well. Some stats, finally, and these are some statistics just to give you some idea, right? Now, these are some distributions that INET has made to the South Asian region. So we are now in this case, Sri Lanka belongs to the South Asia region as well. So this red chunk, now these are all based on /32 or allocations that regional registries distribute to the organizations. Now, you can see that the red area is the India, right? So most of the IPv6 allocations in this sub-region is given to India. And then that's the red area. And then you have the yellow, which is Bangladesh. And then we have that light brownish thing, that's Pakistan. The purple is Nepal, and Sri Lanka is the green, right? So that's kind of the amount of V6 address space as a percentage if you take in this region. So if you go further to, let's say, Asia Pacific, right? So this is South Asia. If you go further to Asia Pacific, now this is Asia Pacific. So you can see that now the South Asia is the little green line over there, the South Asia, and yellow is basically the Eastern Asia. Eastern Asia is economies like Japan and Korea and so on, China and so on. And the blue is Oceania, which is Australia, New Zealand, and many of the Pacific Islands and so on. So that's in those regions. And the red is Southeastern Asia, which is economies like Thailand, Vietnam, and so on. So the green is South Asia. So that's the situation in the Asia Pacific. Now going further one level, this is the worldwide. So worldwide, different regions, the 5 regions, 5 RIR regions. So the Asia Pacific again, that's the blue, right? The dark blue. The light blue is actually RIPE and CC, which is Europe. So those are some stats. We have so far delegated these IPv6 addresses to different, based on those delegations. Now, this is the whole, if you take the whole IPv6 address space as a kind of whole, right? So you can see that there is, for all the RIRs, that yellow, the /3, what we say, that's the kind of block which that IANA is reserving, or kind of the RIRs or the regional registries are getting. So all the regional registries back in around 2006, they have received something like a /12. It's a pretty big block, right? /12. So all those 5 /12s, what we mentioned here, those are the 5 blocks that each regional registry has received from IANA. So if you see that as a comparison, that I don't know whether you can even see that in the diagram, that's a little blue thin line. There's a little blue thin line. That's the amount of space which is currently given to the RIR. So you can see that there's plenty of, huge amount of IPv6 address space. It is really big. It can last for many, many years, right? Some operational statistics as well. Now, this is the IPv4 BGP routing table. Now, when it comes to the routing table, in other words, these are the prefixes that are advertised by the organization. Now, if you see the IPv4 prefixes, there are around close to, more than 350,000 prefixes in the IPv4 routing table, right? Now, comparing to that, if you see the IPv6 routing table, you'll see close to around 6,000 prefixes, right? Of course, if you compare 350,000 versus 6,000, there's a big difference in that. But the good news is that you can see that the IPv6 routing table is growing quite, exponentially, which means many, by day, many organizations are announcing these prefixes, right? So that's the situation in terms of the routing table. Now, this is just another global view based on peering. The left side is basically IPv4 internet, right? And then the right side is actually the IPv6 internet. So there's plenty of growth is expected over there with regard to V6. Some further stats on world internet users talking about. Now, if you can see, the Asia is the highest over there, around 800 million users or so, if you talk about. Now, when it comes to the internet penetration, it's kind of the other way around. The Asia comes almost, bottom there, around 21% or so. You can see that there is a huge, even though there are 800 million users at the moment, which is kind of highest, but still, if you see the amount of growth which can happen is tremendous in the future, right? There's big growth, and it is up there. So the thing is that obviously IPv4 cannot support this. It cannot handle this kind of demand or the growth. It has to be definitely IPv6. So finally, in conclusion, now, the thing is, the key idea what we want to give here is prepare for IPv6 now, right? So we are in the final /8, and make sure that when you go back, or at least think about IPv6 in your network, right? Do something about it. Even though if you can't do it in a big way, at least in a small way, try to do something, right? That's the key message. And we want to give, so if someone asks, what's the killer application for IPv6? We just want to give only one single answer, which is the internet, right? So that's about my presentation, and thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take maybe one or two. And otherwise, feel free to talk to me. I'll be around here, okay? Okay, the question is why in Oceania, in Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific Islands, and so on, they have big amount of IP addresses comparing to Asia, right? Or South Asia, for example. Now, the thing is, now these IP addresses are allocated based on the need and based on the requirement or the demand. So, for example, if you see the infrastructure-wise in places like Australia, even for that, maybe Japan and Korea and so on, there are a number of economies where you'll find the infrastructure and the need, the requirement is much higher than in many of the other economies. So that is why, since these addresses are being allocated based on the demand, if some ISP comes and say that we need, this is my plan, this is our plan, they need IP addresses, they are being allocated. So it's purely based on the demand, purely based on the requirement. So that is also why I'm trying to show you that in South Asia, there's a big potential growth, demand is being expected. So when they ask for IP addresses, there is always, they can always get the IP addresses. Okay? Yeah?
I have a question. Is there a date, something in the future, where it will be all IPv6 and not IPv6 plus IPv4?
Okay, good question. Okay, now with regard to the date, a cutoff date, no, there is no such cutoff date. It's not like moving from the 99 to year 2000, the year 2000 thing. No, not like that. There's no cutoff date. It can go, it all depends on how everyone put their effort. Now, the thing is that sometimes, even after 10 years, 15 years, you will still find some IPv4 pockets. It won't go away. It will be still there. But the thing is, more and more, when the time passes, more and more organizations will get IPv6, and then maybe after 5 years, 10 years, you'll find an IPv6, you'll have more IPv6 networks, but few IPv4 pockets. So to answer your questions, no, there's no cutoff date. That is also why we want to actually encourage people and try to do it as soon as possible. Okay? All right, thank you very much.